Following the 2008 financial crisis, our Financial Services Committee helped enact mortgage reforms under Dodd-Frank. And so I'd like to get an understanding from you of exactly where we are. As I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, we're now at the 10-year anniversary of Dodd-Frank. It doesn't seem like 10 years. But it's about time we kind of look back and see where we are now after 10 years in the critical housing area. So what is the current default risk in each of the GSE's portfolios?
First, Congressman Scott, let me say how much I very strongly agree with you. I think this is an incredibly appropriate and important time to take a look back. The most serious delinquency rates for Fannie and Freddie are respectively 0.67 and 0.61. I will note that these were similar to what they were at the beginning of 2008. So again, there's an old adage that the worst loans are made in the best of times. I think that we should keep that in mind today.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up. How does that risk compare to the default risk in the GSE portfolios in the latter stages of previous economic growth cycles?
So certainly over time, there's been a trend increase. If one goes back, say, to the 60s or 70s, my recollection is that the default rates were significantly lower than they were in the last previous cycle. So certainly the last cycle was an elevated level of foreclosure, elevated level of delinquencies, obviously on the part of all market participants, but also with the GSEs. And hence my concern about if this cycle turns, or, with my concern of whether the GSEs are ready.
Well, it's very good to get your points on this as we look back after 10 years. But let me follow up that. There's been a lot of focus recently on debt-to-income ratio, given the impending expiration of the QM, or qualitative mortgage patch. So, Director, do you feel that the debt to interest deal profile of the DTI profile of the GSE's portfolios, when taken in isolation, is a good measure for us to determine default risk?
I will start out recognizing that the debt-to-income ratio was explicitly mentioned in Dodd-Frank. It is explicitly mentioned. It is perhaps the best measure of ability to pay rather than willingness to pay. And so I do think it's an important factor. I would, of course, be the first to say that borrower credit and loan to value are stronger predictors of default. But again, we'll note that Dodd-Frank specifically lists out a set of factors to be considered within the statute.
Well, the very highly respected Urban Institute found in a recent study that borrowers with DTI ratios above 45% had higher default rates than those below 45%. Buyers before and during the financial crisis, but high DTI borrowers have actually had lower default since 2011, as I'm sure you know. Correct. So with that in mind, is debt to income the right measurement of underwriting quality?
Certainly with appropriate overlays, I think you can offset that risk. And if where the gentleman is going, I would certainly be very supportive of Congress revisiting having that DTI mandated within the statute. I certainly think it's past time to reevaluate the effectiveness of the qualified mortgage rule.
Thank you. Dr. and Secretary Ben Carson, I can't let this opportunity escape for you to answer us. Do you have, in your own opinion, a full grasp of the impact of homelessness in this nation? Do you? And if so, what are you willing to say about it? You are the person that's at the point of the spear in our federal government to deal with homelessness.
I've had a lot to say about it.
Unfortunately, the chair lady has brought the hammer down, but I certainly look forward to hearing what you have to say later on.
The
Thank you.
witness is requested to provide an answer in writing.